me, Senator Craven.
I was expecting it. Welcome.
Thank you. Senator Craven, Representative Farnsworth, and members of the Joint Sitting Committee on Health and Human Services. My name is Holly Lusk, and I serve as the Senior Health Policy Advisor in the Office of the Governor. It's my pleasure to be here. I appreciate this opportunity to testify in support of the Governor's welfare reform bills, LDs 1815, 1820, 1822, and 1842. I just want to take this opportunity to say how appreciative I am. When these bills were first announced back in December and January, I was approached by a number of people from both sides of the aisle to have private discussions about them. They were very pleasant discussions, not a lot of rhetoric, and people had some excellent questions. And I hope that we can continue that today because I've been most pleased about the outreach from both sides of the aisle on these. With respect to 1815, this bill requires the job-ready TANF applicants submit 3 applications for employment before they start receiving benefits. The purpose of this bill is to ensure that someone who needs financial assistance is taking a multi-pronged approach, looking for employment at the same time as applying for taxpayer-funded help. Currently, 18 other states and the District of Columbia have job search requirements as a condition of eligibility before or during the application process. As the bill states, these applications would need to be submitted at any time during a 3-week period, starting 1 week prior to the TANF application date to 2 weeks after the TANF application is submitted. The reason we picked this time frame was so as to not lengthen the existing period of time between the application date and the time an applicant begins receiving benefits. This bill complements the work DHHS is already doing with the Department of Education and the Department of Labor to focus on getting TANF recipients back to productive employment if they face barriers. The department has some excellent ideas on how to implement this bill so that folks coming in to apply can immediately sign up and apply through the DOL Job Bank. This bill emphasizes the important value of employment and remaining in the workforce and encourages self-sufficiency before dependency. We are pleased to submit this legislation and are thankful to Representative Fredette for putting this idea forward originally before the Legislative Council. LD 1820, I want to thank Representative Netto for sponsoring this bill for us. This bill limits electronic use of the EBT card, whether through ATMs or point-of-sale devices, to access TANF benefits outside the state. DHHS data indicates that many individuals who have main EBT cards are accessing their TANF benefits for consistent periods of time outside the state, sometimes upwards of a year. States have taken varying approaches to ensure that recipients who have left their state do not stay on their TANF programs. For example, they limit the period of time a card can be used out of state before it will be shut off, due to a rebuttable presumption of lack of residency. Other states have taken a similar approach in examining geographic restrictions on use of the cards. Minnesota, for example, has implemented a geographic restriction to that state and those that border it. DHHS data indicates EBT cards have been used across the United States and even in some U.S. territories like the Virgin Islands. I know many constituents take issue with paying for the travel of these temporarily needy families. This bill would not prohibit withdrawal of cash benefits to be taken across state lines. A TANF recipient can still use their cash all across the country. This bill helps to ensure that the people in our TANF program are Mainers. Additionally, I would add that we have been contacted many times by law enforcement regarding the appearance of Maine EBT cards at drug busts in Maine. If an individual traffics their EBT card to purchase something like drugs, which is currently illegal, they need to understand the individual to whom the card is given may take it across state lines, and the recipient could suffer the consequences of an out-of-state use. LD 1822. And thank you to Representative McDonald for sponsoring this bill. This bill restricts the use of TANF benefits from being spent on certain items: alcohol, tobacco, lottery tickets, gambling activities, or bail. Federal law has outlined goals for the TANF program, which include assisting needy families to care for children and to promote work and marriage in order to reduce dependency. Because federal TANF funds are issued in block grants, states are allowed flexibility in administering the programs. States are also responsible for ensuring program integrity. We believe that spending TANF dollars on alcohol, tobacco, lottery tickets, gambling activities, and bail does not further the goals of the TANF program. Indeed, this is why many states are restricting how TANF funds are spent. These efforts are a complement to state and federal efforts to limit where TANF funds are accessed through ATMs. Currently, Maine is in the process of restricting access to TANF funds at ATMs in locations such as liquor stores, casinos, and strip clubs. We believe this bill is an effective next step in deterring TANF recipients from using funds inappropriately and to encourage those dollars to be spent on the true daily needs of the family. LD 1842. This bill attempts to address a problematic disconnect between state and federal TANF regulations. For nearly the last 20 years, the federal government has required that TANF recipient parents participate in approximately 30 to 35 hours per week of work activities. There are very few federal exceptions to this work requirement. Soon after the federal welfare reform was enacted, Maine legislated a series of state exceptions to eliminate sanctions for failure to meet the federal work requirement. Under Maine law, TANF recipients could not be sanctioned for failure to abide by the federal work requirement if they met one of many state exceptions. Inclement weather kept them from going to work, they were victims of domestic violence, they were incarcerated, or they had some other good cause, etc. For most of the time these state exceptions have been in place, the federal government did not truly enforce the work requirement. That has changed. Maine has received communication from the federal government that it is now imposing financial penalties on states whose TANF populations fail to meet the work participation rate requirements. The federal government intends to impose a penalty on Maine for years 2007 to 2010 in the total amount of approximately $13 million. For each successive year the state fails to meet the requirements, a fine is assessed. In order to ensure our TANF work participation rate meets federal requirements, we need help from the legislature in bringing our TANF laws back in line with the federal law. That is the essence of this bill, eliminating provisions that negatively affect our work participation rate. This includes elimination of the state work exceptions and of a program called Parents as Scholars. Parents as Scholars is a program that was developed to assist TANF recipients to obtain 2- or 4-year degrees. While federal law only permits vocational educational work to fulfill the work participation requirement for 12 months that an individual is on TANF, the state law allowed Parents as Scholars to count educational work for up to 24 months. Therefore, unfortunately, the federal government counts the individuals in Parents as Scholars against our work participation rate once they pass the 12-month lifetime threshold. This does not mean that these individuals have to cease going to school, nor does it mean that they will have no job training. What it means is that the federal government holds them to the same standard as everyone else in the TANF program. And in addition to going to school, they must meet the federal work requirement. I am pleased to report that we do believe that the domestic violence exception can be retained in state law. The governor has asked the department to submit a domestic violence waiver request to the federal government. This would allow those claiming the domestic violence waiver exception under Maine law not to count against our work participation requirement. I encourage the committee through its amendment process to remove the domestic violence exception from the current bill, meaning that the exception would remain in law. And I want to thank the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence for reaching out on this particular issue. I know it's an issue that's near and dear to many people's hearts, and keeping it in the bill, I think, would be the best option, especially as we will find a way to keep those folks from counting against us in the work participation rate. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have and to provide any additional information at the work session. Also wanted to highlight that there are folks from DOL to talk to you on 1815 and from the department to speak to all 4 of the bills. Insofar as data is concerned, I think the department might be the best folks to ask, but I will do my best, so I'm at your disposal.
Thank you, Ms. Lusk. Are there questions from Ready?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Several things, if that's okay. How long does it take for someone to apply for TANF until they actually usually get benefits?
My understanding is it's about a 30-day, 25 to 30-day period, and I'll let Beth Ham from OFI clarify if I've gotten that wrong. But that's one of the reasons why we wanted to pick that 3-week period. When you come in and apply for your TANF benefits, before you start receiving benefits, you actually have a TANF orientation where they sort of walk you through what the requirements are going to be for being on TANF, and at that point in time, they can actually help you start to apply for jobs as well. You can do that when you come in to apply or at the orientation.
I know in the last legislative session there was a bill that was passed that does an analysis when people are in the TANF program to see if they should be disabled or whether they should be in school. So has that gone into effect yet? And if not, when is it supposed to be implemented? Do you know the answer?
My understanding is that we are kind of in the first couple of months of implementing that, and as I understand it, that is working with the Department of Education and also with the Department of Labor and DHHS kind of together communicating in order to identify barriers that TANF recipients have that may prevent them from accessing a job, whether it's an issue of language or it's an issue of education or if it's an issue of a disability. We don't envision this being a problem. We view this law as being a complement to that. That's what I'm trying to say. We don't envision it creating any barriers to that other program going on.
And is there a list somewhere of the exemptions for the work? I mean, do you actually have a list that we can look at?
Meaning for the work, meaning our state exceptions?
Yes.
I can give you a site, give Anna a site. It's 20.
You've got it in front of you. It's the big fat blue packet. If you just, I'm sorry, I don't remember what the section is on.
Yep, it's section 3785, Title 22.
And do you know the answer to how TANF is funded? Is it all federal money?
It's state and federal money. We do have some maintenance of effort dollars, and I'll have the department tell you more about what the allocation is. But yes, it is state and federal, primarily federal.
And I know that it says that we have been issued fines. Have we actually paid any money for fines from the state of Maine?
No, not as of this time. I understand that we in California are kind of furthest along in the process in terms of the assessment process of the fines being imposed. We have submitted a corrective action plan to the feds in order to say, here are the steps that we're going to take to try to remedy the problem of the low work participation rate that we have. So until more work has been done, at this point in time, I don't know what we're anticipating in terms of a date. But at some point in time, we do anticipate they will impose those penalties.
And the Parents as Scholars program, so the statement that you have implies that you will continue a similar program but call it something else, but that you're going to require these people to be in school full-time and work 30 hours a week? Is that what you're going to suggest? So
what federal law allows right now, as part of the work participation rates, or the work participation requirement, they will allow over a period of someone's lifetime, 12 months to be counted as going towards the work participation rate. So someone can go to school for 12 months, and it will count for the feds for that period of time. After that point in time, the feds say you have to do something else as your work participation rate or your work participation requirement. So individuals can still go to school. It might not be full-time. It might not be, or it might be part-time. I know a lot of people who are adults who go to school part-time and also work part-time. We already have supports in place. Those individuals would still be getting the TANF benefits that they're getting now, and they also would have job training and other workplace supports. So the only difference with the Parents as Scholars program is the additional 12 months that the state says that will count as your work participation requirement. The feds say you can't do that.
But right now they only have 5 years to have TANF benefits, and if you're going to school part-time and trying to get a degree, you're probably not going to get your degree through that program, is what it sounds like to me. Do you think that's true?
I would have no information as to whether someone would be likely to not get their education as a result of the TANF cap or not. I can't tell you.
My concern is also the Parents as Scholars program. 2 years is the full-time equivalent of a community college degree. I have many people in my district who attend Kennebec Valley Community College. I know quite a number of parents on Tanf who actually go to Kennebec Valley Community College. So I guess my question is, can you explain to me the process for, as far as I know, Tanf is a block grant from the federal government, the flexibility allowed in addressing issues like this, because there is some flexibility allowed in block granting.
With the work participation rate, we don't have flexibility. The domestic violence waiver that I mentioned to you, that would be one small bit of flexibility. That's one of the only options that the feds offer. Other than that, they are not flexible when it comes to the work participation rate requirement. There are some things that we can do to try to improve our rate, but with respect to, whether we could ask for those people to be exempted, they have, there are other states that have similar programs. I don't know that anyone has asked, and I don't believe it would be granted.
So can you explain to me kind of how people with domestic violence issues, how you can be flexible regarding that, but not people who maybe need to complete an education degree that would actually lead them to have better paying employment and getting off?
I don't disagree with you. It's a specific, the domestic violence waiver is a specific waiver offered by the federal government. They don't offer an educational waiver. They have said you have 12 months, and that's 12 months to count it as your sole work participation requirement. So after that point in time, it's not that you can't continue to go to school, it's that you still have to have on top of that 30 hours that would meet the work participation requirement.
So someone who had a domestic violence history, they could meet the requirements under this waiver and continue to go to school for 2 years, or for longer than the 1 year. But someone who did not have a domestic violence history would not be able to do that?
I think I'll probably let the department answer that particular question, insofar as we're now dealing with an intersection of potentially meeting a federal waiver for domestic violence and yet not meeting the waiver, or not meeting the work participation rate requirements. So I'll defer to them on that.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Does work activities include volunteer work, or is that paid work? How is that defined?
I apologize that I did not bring my list, and I know that Beth sent it to me before I came over here. There are a number of things that that apply. I think volunteer work is one of those things. As I recall, yes, I'm getting the signal from the crowd. Yes, volunteer work is included in that.
So maybe we get a list of those activities, maybe it's on the blue sheet as well.
We can provide that to you very shortly.
Thank you. Just a couple questions, Holly. Thank you. The corrective action plan that you mentioned, so the department filed that with the federal government, but we haven't gotten a response back, is that?
I know there's been communication back and forth on it, because there were they came in a few different series, because we're dealing with a number of years, Representative.
Right.
I think the 07 one came first.
Right.
And then there was the 08 through 10 communication and corrective action plan that followed that. So
my impression was that we filed one for 07 and we're waiting to get a response, or did I misunderstand that?
I believe that we have filed corrective action plans for 07 through 10, but I will let the department confirm that.
Okay. And then, actually, just to be clear, someone from the department following up?
Yes.
To testify today? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You won't have to wait long.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, to me, one of the real benefits of the promise of TANF, of course, are all the, the job-related support that you get once you're on the program, transportation and the child care and, support and counseling. I guess I'm concerned about how people are going to access those services, which I think are really important to meet the goals of the program, if we put restrictions in front of them to actually get on the program in the first place. And again, I'm referring back to the, you have to show proof of 3 jobs first. I guess I'm very concerned that people are not going to get access to the actual services that are actually going to get them back to work permanently and stable and in a position to support their families independently.
Well, what I can say to that, and I know this kind of answers Representative Cassidy's question a little bit earlier when we were talking about the able-bodied. We talked about disabled versus able-bodied. I think that the trend nationally with respect to what constitutes job-ready, at least, which is what we've put in this particular bill, which is undefined, and part of that is my drafting style tends to be simpler rather than more complicated. And I think that also it gives people a little bit of flexibility at the department level because they understand the issue, better than some of us do. I think that, me. What I would say is that the national trend in terms of defining what job readiness is, the following individuals would be exempt from the rule. And again, I'm not saying that this is exactly where this bill is headed, but this is what we see at the national level. Those who are disabled, those who are caring for children under 12 months or who are a disabled family member, those who are in their third trimester of pregnancy, those who are victims of domestic violence, or those with no recent work history, no recent exposure to the job world, like for the last 6 months or so. So that's what we've seen at the national level in terms of how other states define job readiness.
Right, but that definition of job ready isn't in the bill that's been brought in front of us, and it doesn't exist anywhere currently in our rules.
Correct.
So we'd be leaving it up to the department through rulemaking to define
Either
what job ready is, or?
That's at least how we intended to leave it, was through that process. I mean, as you know, there's also a public weigh-in process and the rulemaking process as well, in addition to the legislative process. So that's what we intended to do, was to leave it to the people of the department, because I didn't want to add an entirely new system that's different from what they already have going on. For example, with the other bills, like 1822, for example, you'll notice that there are no penalties listed in that particular bill. Well, one of the reasons why is the department already has an intentional program violation, rulemaking in place. I don't want to add on to that. I'd like them to use what they've already got. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Just clarification, Representative Gatine just mentioned you have to search for 3 jobs before applying for TANF. You have to apply for 1 job before submitting your application, but you must follow up with at least 2 more after the first 2 weeks?
No, what it is, and you don't actually have to apply for any jobs. You don't have to apply for any jobs before you apply for TANF. I mean, a lot of people might not know about the requirement. Let's say someone comes into the TANF office. What happens if they didn't know about the requirement to apply for a job? If someone does know about the requirement, we give a week ahead of time, because they may already be looking for work. So we don't want to say, we know you've been looking for work, but now you have to start looking for more work. So if they've already been looking for work, we're counting that week ahead of, in advance of the TANF application date to 2 weeks afterwards. And the reason why we have that time limited is because we can't add additional time onto the period of the time period between the application date and when we start giving benefits. We're statutorily not supposed to add additional time there. So we're trying not to do that. What I would say is, what we're asking folks to do is submit 3 applications for jobs somewhere, anywhere during that 3-week period, and provide evidence of that, if requested, to the department.
Okay, thank you.